Hey, folks, welcome back. This is Andy from the Poor Proles Almanac. If you've been around for our Twitch series, this should be nothing new to you. Today, we're going to be talking about Radio 101. We've got a handful of folks watching on my phone right here as I stream live. So hopefully, they'll jump over. So if you guys want to watch more folks that are on Instagram, you're going to have to hop onto Twitch, Facebook, YouTube, wherever the other folks are watching this right now. Join us, learn a lot about radio because I don't know anything. And just based on what's been going on with Russia the last couple weeks, it's been made very evident the importance of being able to use analog radio and finding alternatives to communicate with folks. So if you aren't familiar with this kind of stuff, come jump on our Twitch or YouTube or Facebook or any of those things. So I'm going to bring my co-host on, and then I'm going to bring our guest. So bye, folks that are on Instagram. Elliot, what's going on?
What's up, buddy?
So when we started this podcast, like one of the first things you said to me, it was like, "Hey, I've got this radio. I got to figure out how to use it." And it's been like 2 years now, and I'm assuming you haven't figured out how to use it.
Are you
So
talking to me?
yeah,
Oh, I figured out how to use it. I just
okay,
forgot because I haven't used it more than once.
all right. So yeah, it's there's a lot to it, and so today we've got a guest to talk about that. Folks that are in our Discord may recognize the handle. Hopefully, there's a few of y'all out there. If you are, jump in the chat, say hi. So I'm going to introduce our good friend here, Seneca.
Hey, everybody.
How's it going?
Great. Thank you for having me tonight.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. You're
Thanks
like
for coming on. Good
one of the
evening.
only people I know that was like, yeah, I can talk about radio. It's easy to buy one. It's hard to figure out how to use it, and then further how to like legally use it.
That's the tricky part, right? I'm going to talk a lot about the legal part too, because that's important. And you should always follow all federal uh, laws and regulations.
It's
Um,
a good life motto,
yeah,
we'll
sure.
say. We'll say.
I will say. What I wanted to talk about first is like why should people care? Like, if you're watching this, why do you care about radio? And I heard you mention Russia, and I'm going to talk about that later too. Because yeah, communications is obviously super important. And we do it today because we have this fancy high tech infrastructure, and that's how we're talking right now. But those things, can be disrupted. Uh, Emergencies happen, and that's actually a big reason for why amateur radio exists in the first place and is indulged to an extent by the United States government and other governments, because in emergencies, amateur radio operators become the communications network, and you can actually even volunteer for that um, with a program called RACES. And the other reason too is, these communication networks are privately owned, and we've seen examples before of governments shutting off access to it. Um, they cannot shut off your ability to use electrons to make radio waves come out of an antenna. Um, uh, there's more to it than that, obviously, but if the grid goes down tomorrow and the internet's not working anymore, um, this will still work.
Yeah.
And
Basic physics.
Yeah, it really is. And if you're not a science person, if you don't have a technical background, let me say that. Will you let us cuss on ham channels, Seneca? No, sorry, you can't. No swear words. That's a no no. You're not allowed.
I'll be
Um,
dead silent on the air then. I can't use a radio.
no, yeah, you were super duper not supposed to use bad language. I'll talk more about like what you can say and what you can't, because there's definitely a lot of rules around that, and some surprising ones. For example, you don't have to speak English. You can speak any language you want over the airwaves. What you can't do is send encrypted communications. That's illegal. Nor can you speak in coded language. So obviously, like, if you tune in to a frequency and you hear people speaking and you don't understand the language, like, you don't know what they're saying, right? But um, the airwaves, the amateur bands, and we'll talk about what the heck a band is a little bit later. Um, they police it themselves, and they will record you and report you, and the FCC will take your license away and slap you with a big fine. Um, I think besides like the obvious emergency situations, government problems, societal unrest, whatever. It's a really fun thing to nerd out on, and you're kind of like an electricity wizard. Doing magic with my my metal bits and stuff. So later on, I'm going to talk about my venerable shortwave radio. It's a Radio Shack DX398. And I'm old enough that I was using this to listen to radio news during 9/11 when I was in college.
That was going to be
Um,
my that was going to be my first question. So how long have you been hamming it up?
That's a great question. I've actually only really been doing this for about like 2 years. So
Okay.
at some point during 2020, I was starting to get into more of some of the topics that you guys talk about, including prepping stuff, which includes firearm stuff. And one adjacent topic to that is radio, and not like in a LARPing sense, but literally, you can use these. These are my Impact Sports, and they have a little attachment which I'll show later how to use this to
Yeah.
plug your radio into, and you can use that to talk to people at the range while live fire is going on. There is that dimension to it, and also if you're working with like a large outdoor space, it can be useful to be able to talk back and forth
Sure.
between your family or your friends or whatever. And we'll talk about what your options are for how to do that. So that's my pitch. If you don't have this capability and there are no other options, your communication choices are pretty limited.
Yeah.
I
Now,
definitely want to learn it for the redundancy. You
Hmm.
said that you can hook it up to your ear protection
Yeah.
for shooting and stuff.
Hmm.
Going hunting, it's super important to have like a redundancy and like comms because my brother was just relying on his cell phone and that died, and he was out in the woods past sundown, and that's not something you want happening when you're on a hunting trip. So
No,
that was
you don't want to be relying on cell phones whether you're hunting in the woods or you're invading Ukraine. You
right,
want to have
right.
other options. Yeah.
Right. It was
yeah.
his first time. It was a big learning opportunity for him, and he asked me why I was interested in it, and I pretty much gave him that scenario, and he said, "Yeah, me too," and that was it. He didn't have to elaborate at all.
It's
Yeah.
always nice when you don't have to convince them, right?
Right.
Yeah. But life experiences will do that really quick.
Yeah, that's
So
true.
I want to ask before we even get into like the content itself,
Sure.
like how accessible is this financially for people?
That's a really good question. So if you want to study it, the cost is zero. There's tons of free resources out there, and I'm not even just talking about studying for your ham radio exam, but just learning radio frequency, the science, how it works. YouTube is a great resource also. And when we talk a little bit later about the Anarchist Radio Relay League document, that author mentions a few different people who are on YouTube that you can go to learn more from. Um, that said, if you want to do more than say, go to a website that lets you listen to world radio or study, you do have to at some point pay some money, either for something like this. This is a hand transceiver, or HT. Transceiver is a combination of the words transmitter and receiver. So this right here, I got with a bunch of other little accessories I'll show later. I think it was like 40 something. That was a decent deal. This is a TID radio. Don't be fooled. It's a Baofeng. It's a rebranded Baofeng. It's a to be specific, it's a rebranded BFH6. Baofengs are nice because they're very cheap. And if you want a low level, an easy access to it, this is a good place to start, because they work well enough. Um,
Andy was
would a
talking about the UV5Rs that I got
Yep,
earlier,
the
about a year
ubiquitous
ago.
UV5R.
Yeah, it's everywhere.
Hmm.
I picked one up for super cheap, and that's the one that I
Hmm.
learned on real quick, and it was sort of like a one and done thing. So
Yeah,
I'm pretty much starting over again. So
yeah.
thank you for this.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. I will talk when I get more into technical stuff later. I will talk about why maybe you should think twice before buying a UV5R, especially an older one.
Sure,
Because they're technically not in compliance with FCC regulations. But
depending on how you use it, right?
yes, yes, exactly. So like that's not a big deal. You just have to be a little bit more careful
Mhm.
with it. And I'll explain why. It won't make too much sense until I've gone a little bit more into the technical stuff. Another
Before we get
option. Oh,
before we get going,
yeah, sure.
so I think most people say like 40, $50. That's not terrible. But I think just because of the way technology is built today, we are like, okay, 40, $50. This lasts for 2 or 3 years. How long does this equipment usually last?
So that's a really good point, and I'm glad you brought that up. Because I'm going to make a point about this little doohickey you can see right here sticking out of the radio on top. So it really depends on how much energy you're putting through it, how much use it's being put through. I've heard people say that their Baofangs continue to work well after a few years. But you know, they don't have the same level of environmental integrity as a more expensive hand transceiver like a Yasu. But the Yasu is like 200 or 300 bucks. So it is definitely not like an apocalypse purchase kind of thing. If that makes sense. It's not a buy it for life at all. Um, and the problem with cheap electronics is that over time, the solder can wear out, and the electronics just don't work anymore. And these are just as vulnerable to that as any other old computer or old piece of electronics.
Okay.
So another option, which is also in like the $30 or $40 range, is this guy right here. Okay, this is a Nestor Smart. This is what's called an SDR, or software defined radio. This is actually a little USB port. So this goes right into your computer. I have attached here my rubber ducky. That's what these little antennas are called. They suck, FYI. They're not good. But it's what comes with like every radio you buy. And so this lets me, even if the internet's not working, use radio on my computer using open source software. I'll talk more about that a little bit later too, how that all works. And then the thing about the hand transceiver is a transceiver, so I can transmit on it. That's pretty good. If we're talking about practicing using radio, if you can't transmit, you're not really practicing. This, however, I cannot transmit with. If you want an SDR that you can transmit with, that's going to cost several $100s. So those are the cheaper options. If you want, when people think of ham radio, they think of like those huge sets that sit on top of the desktop. They're all covered in knobs and stuff. That's for HF, high frequency, and they're very expensive. They're very expensive. They can run a few $1,000s. It's definitely like a hobby in a space you can sink a lot of money into. Maybe not as much as firearms, but it's kind of comparable, honestly.
Jesus.
Sure,
Yeah.
but I guess that gives you a wider cone of capability, though, if you're going to spend all that money, right? So,
Yep. Oh,
um,
there are so many features that you can get if you have the resources.
sure. So I can definitely see how that's a lot of fun and how people get into this. as a
Yeah.
a side hobby, something to
Yeah,
do.
it was originally for me supposed to be something that was like supplemental to some of the other stuff like firearms, medical, maintenance, horticulture. But I guess I kind of liked it so much I ignored the other things to an extent to focus on radio. Um,
That's how we define a hobby. I love it.
yeah, yeah. So I spent 2020 studying for my technician class ham radio exam. I passed that and I became um, uh, an official ham in early 21, so that was early last year. And over the course of last year, I then repeatedly was taking more and more tests to get to where I am now, which is an amateur extra. It's like the third level. Um, the difference between the different levels is that I have more access to other frequencies and can do more stuff. Um, at some point after that, I found out that my great grandfather was a ham. I didn't know that, and he was the first ham in his town in Massachusetts. And so I have like a copy of his card, which you send to a person that you connect with on the air as like proof. Oh my God, thank you for asking this question. This is a really good question that just got asked. Okay, the answer is you can try to get licensed with the United States government using a PO box. You still have to include your real name. And I'm glad you brought this up because one thing about radio, about licensed radio, is that you have a call sign, and this is going to be true for ham radio and also for GMRS, which I'll talk a little bit more about later. That's another option you can take other than ham. It's more expensive, but there's no test, and it covers your whole immediate family. So there's that, and then the problem with the call sign is it instantaneously doxes you. I won't tell you guys my call sign. I'm not going to say it on the air because once you have the call sign, you can go to the FCC website and you can look me up. You will find my name and my address. I did not read the Anarchist Radio Relay League guide soon enough to be reminded to use a PO box. I think in theory I could change that in their database, but yeah. If somebody is listening to the frequency you're talking on, you have to say your call sign. So anybody listening to that conversation knows who I am. So that's absolutely something that you should take into consideration. And is also why you should not behave badly on the air because everybody knows who you are.
No hiding.
There's no hiding on amateur radio. It is a scary kind of security risk. I absolutely agree with that. Fortunately, there's some things we can do to mitigate that risk. And one of them is the simple fact that we can practice with this without having the broadcast go very far. A hand transceiver, simply put, just cannot carry your signal that far.
It's pretty much line of sight, right?
That's right, line of sight.
You said hand transceiver. I thought HT was handy talkie, and this is why you have somebody else tell you how to use the radio. Because I was just making it up as I go. I just saw it, the H/T. I was like, all right, I know what that is. I've seen those before.
If anybody's sitting here wondering, like, well, wait, aren't walkie-talkies just radios? And it's true, they are. They just happen to be in a specific part of the electromagnetic frequency range that is set aside for that sort of thing. And they're kind of like stuck using one frequency. You can't have your walkie-talkie. What if you're near a repeater? Well, first I'd have to know what a repeater is, and I haven't explained that yet. A repeater is a radio device which takes in signals on one frequency and rebroadcasts them out on a different frequency. You can look up where repeaters are. You may have one living near you, which is both handy and potentially scary too, right? This is what we call duplex operation. Duplex meaning we take in a signal on one frequency and we spit something back out on another frequency. That's different from simplex, which is exactly what the walkie-talkie is. Only one person can talk at a time. Why? Because we are sending and receiving on the same frequency. If
So
you
it's
both try at the same time, interference doesn't work.
yeah, so it's basically like an analog VPN.
Yeah, you could look at it that way. Sure.
The repeater is, yeah. So there's a whole rabbit hole we can go down with the science of how radio waves work. Where did you see this going? Because I could ask so many questions and I don't want to
Sure.
get sidetracked.
I think this is a super overwhelming space because it goes down from like the simplest stuff to like serious PhD level physics. I think let's save the like super complicated stuff closer towards the end because hopefully by that time I've explained some of this and we're not sitting here being like, what's a repeater?
Sure. So you take the reins. I'll save my
Okay. All right.
questions
Cool.
I'll
Okay.
save my questions for the end.
Okay. Sure. So let me talk about this and real quick. I don't know if you have like a big international audience. Most of what I'm going to be talking about is applicable no matter where you live, but some stuff is going to be slightly different, especially like what frequency bands are set aside to do what. For that, you're going to want to check in with your country's ham radio association. They'll be able to help you out. That said, in the US, there are 4 main routes we can take with this. Okay, one we've talked about before is amateur radio. You can become a ham. What is a ham? Like, what does that mean? No one's entirely sure. There's actually like a lot of radio lore that nobody knows what the origin is. We're not entirely certain. I've heard a bunch of different stories. It doesn't matter.
It makes sense. 2 people screaming at each other over a radio that barely works. There's definitely a chance for misunderstanding there.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I've already hammed it up a little bit. Hopefully, not too much. So that's one option. Ham radio is very cool. There's a lot you can do with it, and it's way more than just talking. As someone pointed out, packet radio can give you internet. You can have the internet over amateur radio. You can do that today if you want. You can do video. I can do analog television over amateur bands if I want to. I don't know why I would want to. And I'm not sure exactly what the rules are for that because you're supposed to be using amateur radio to talk to people, not to just, broadcasting whatever you want to send out there. The fee for taking the ham radio exam, when I took it, it was 15. They were talking about that it might go up in price to like 20, 25. I'm not sure if that's actually happened yet or not. And you have to pass the technician exam for your technician class license. There are, I believe, 25 questions. You can get up to 8 of them wrong, so it's not that tough of a test. It's all multiple choice. It's still 15 right now. Thank you.
The test covers a lot of subject matter, though. I'm guessing.
Yeah. So the test pool is enormous, and you're only going to wind up seeing a very small slice of it. The testing, the tests are grouped every 4 years, so we're actually almost at the end of this year for the technician exam. So that's stuff I posted on the Discord server in the ham radio thread. That'll be valid throughout the rest of the year. I'm going to try to add more stuff to it too. I have a little bit more that's already written. It is totally doable. For my first test, I studied for over several long months, and I took a lot of practice tests. For the general exam, which is a little bit harder, more questions, more complicated, it's more technical. And for the amateur extra, I actually was able to link up with a local radio club that was running free classes. And it was like an intensive, hardcore, like 3 hour a night, 5 day a week test. And it worked. I didn't have to spend like 6 months studying for these other exams, and I really did not think I was going to be prepared for it. So, if you think you're, if you're like, oh, I don't want to take a test, that sounds like a lot of work. Um, I will say that it's less than you think, and it's also a pretty interesting pathway into this. One of the main ways that I learned about, radio frequency is literally just studying for the ham exam. And you do pick up a lot of technical knowledge that way, and you also get to learn a lot about things like no, you cannot swear on the air. You cannot decrypt transmissions on the air and that sort of thing. Yes, it's true. If you fail, so if you pay the $15 and you take the test and you fail it, you can give them another $15 and they'll give you another test. I guarantee you they will sit there and wait for you. They'll be happy to do it.
I give them
Everybody,
$80 and take two at the same time, like scratch tickets.
I believe it's a fee that gets paid to the ARRL, which is the American Radio Relay League. And then at that point, if you pass the test, they'll tell you that you passed the test, and then they send your information to the FCC. And as soon as you are in there, as soon as you appear in the FCC database, you can start transmitting on the ham frequencies that you're allowed to use. Where could someone take these tests? That's a very good question. So the pandemic, I think, sparked an increased interest in having these being done remotely. But that I don't think has been too successful. And one of the reasons why is that these are all done by volunteer groups. And the standards for doing it online are super stringent. Like the one group wanted me to have like one camera facing this way and another camera facing this way and have everything be clear in the room so they could see that I'm not reading off of anything. And more importantly, they never got back to me. So that, that kind of doesn't work for that reason. Fortunately, I was able to find a local group that was conducting tests in an outdoor space. It was actually in the parking lot of an engineering firm, which I assume somebody somewhere in that group works for. So you want to find your local ham radio group. Any major town or city is going to have one, and they can help you find where to take a test, which are typically conducted in person.
Awesome.
Yeah. So why would someone want to do this if they just want to have the capability? Well, it lets you practice. It lets you practice transmitting. It lets you practice receiving. You can practice receiving, with a regular radio, right? But there's not much to that. There's only so much to that. Although there's plenty you can study about how reception works. Ultimately, all this is you've got an oscillator in here that's going at the same frequency as the radio wave that you want to pick up. And once they once they meet up, then you can get audio coming through the signal. That's the super duper basic way it works. And of course, everyone has a radio on them too, right? It's called your cell phone. Cell phone is just a fancy radio. So that's ham. That is cheaper than your other option, which is GMRS. And I've forgotten what GMRS stands for, so let me look that up real quick. It stands for the General Mobile Radio Service. So this is part of the electromagnetic frequency that the government had previously set aside for commercial use. But I believe at some point, I want to say in the 90s, they started to no longer issue new licenses to companies, and now it's just for civilian use. So GMRS is great because there's no test. No test. All you got to do is pay the government like $80, and they will give you that license. You will have a call sign, just like you would if you were an amateur on the ham radio frequencies. And the GMRS license applies to everyone in your immediate family. So that could be an advantage if maybe your family does not want to study for a ham radio exam. That might be a hard sell. If they're willing to fork over a little bit extra money, GMRS is an option too. However, that said, GMRS is much more limited in terms of the frequencies you can use. You only get a small slice of the frequencies out there, and it's really only for talking. So, there's no data. There's no what they call CW, which is the fancy way to say Morse code. CW stands for continuous wave. So GMRS is pretty much just for voice. GMRS radios are going to be different from the radios that hams use. This super confused me when I first started out. Generally speaking, the way that the government deals with the fact that it has no way to stop me from trying to use a radio on a frequency it doesn't want me to use. When you buy a radio, it's pretty much set for a certain band. So when you see hand transceivers, typically you see them sold as dual band VHF UHF. That stands for very high frequency and ultra high frequency, which is those are higher frequencies than just the HF high frequency. So this is only built to do that. And likewise, one of the advantages to the SDR is that it doesn't have that limitation. I can use this for any frequency. So the GMRS radios that you buy are going to be for the GMRS frequencies. So if you want to, at some point I probably will eventually get a GMRS license myself, but I'm going to have to get new radios to use it. So that's another option. All right. Let's say you don't want to mess with licensing. You're off the grid. You don't want to, have to contact the government for for any of this. You have
tell me more. Yeah.
Yes, right. So you have two other options. The first option most people are familiar with is CB, Citizens Band. Citizens Band has been around forever, and it is completely available for your average person to go buy a CB radio and use. The main limitations of CB radio is that the power level is much lower, so you are not going to be transmitting as far. That can be an issue depending on your use case. And again, the frequencies that you are allowed to use are limited. The other option is called FRS, which is called the Family Radio Service. This lets you use frequencies similar to GMRS, but there's no license, and the power limits are much lower. So again, you can't transmit as far. FRS.
Those are like the walkie-talkies I grew up with, like as a kid, right?
Yep. Exactly.
Right.
Yep. It's definitely more like that. So if you want to be able to start, if you and a friend want to start practicing, transmitting and receiving, you can do that. You don't need a license. You just need CB radios or FRS radios.
And CB radios are the ones that I guess like truckers and stuff are known to use, and they don't transmit that far, but you can move around and pick up different things. So
it's good enough if you want to talk to another trucker on the road with you. It's ideal for that.
I've talked to plenty of truckers; they're great people.
Yeah, no,
they've got stories. I'll tell you.
Yeah, I
can't tell you I'm not a trucker, but they'll tell you.
Yeah, they tend to like be very excited about it and think it's cool when people get into it. I have heard some weird horror stories over the years though of people abusing that. And let me tell you, do not mess with truckers, because bad things will happen to you. Yeah.
Yeah, they have their own code of justice and shit. It's fucking crazy out there.
Yeah. So always be respectful on the airwaves. That sounds like common sense, right? Yeah, watch out, Bandit. Smokey's coming. Be respectful on the airwaves. You never want to interfere with somebody who's doing radio operations. One of the biggest reasons is you don't know if it's an emergency or not. Emergencies always take precedent over any other use of a frequency, and official use always takes precedence over a frequency. We do not, as amateur radio operators, we do not have the right to parts of the frequency bands. We have the privilege to use them, and that privilege can be revoked quite easily. Somebody asked before in the chat about like, are people really paying attention? Yeah, realistically, if you're screwing around on the radio, will someone report you? Find you. So, the FCC is actually relatively hands off to the amateur bands, and the reason why is because ham operators are cops and they enforce the airwaves themselves, and they do that so that the FCC does not intervene directly, and they take that very seriously. So,
It's the only slice of the frequencies and band that we have available to us, I guess, right? Like
yeah,
that
absolutely.
they flat out said the rest of it isn't for you anyway. So
They're very protective of that. Um, and so, with anything else, it's like, um, you could get away with it if no one hears you, but if somebody does, yeah, you could get reported to the FCC, and they'll take your license away and slap you with a big fine. Do you have any? So one cool thing about both the GMRS license and the amateur license is it's good for 10 years. If you ever lose your license, can you get it back? Yeah, I believe so. I think I want to say after like a 1 year period, you can try again. But you have to like retake the test and stuff.
So when you renew your license, you don't have to take the test though, right? Like normally.
It's good for 10 years. I want to say though that they do make you take the exam again
Oof,
at
that's
the end of
rough.
that period. You know what? In 10 years, a lot of stuff can change. Technology wise.
No, I mean I get that. It's just for me, my brain is like I'll study for it, but like once it's done, it's done. I never have to think about it again. But it's like no, you do.
Mm.
You have to
Mm-hmm.
like brush up on it. You can't just like
It's
put it
true.
put it in the closet and be like I have it now.
Yeah. So, somebody asked about field days. So I haven't personally participated in this, but um, Ham has a lot of like hobbies, hidden hobbies within hobbies, and one of them is field day. So, there are a bunch of different types of contests that the amateur radio community puts on, and the goal of the contest is to connect with as many people as possible. And the person with the most contacts wins, and that's part of why you have these. They call them QSL cards that you get made up so you can send to somebody, which is proof that you spoke to them. Um, Another like mini hobby within a hobby is being able to broadcast from weird places like the tops of mountains, and other like inaccessible locations. Um, and Yeah, there's a lot of like really hyper specific niches that you can find within the radio space. It's very cool. So those are the four main paths. I totally recommend people give ham radio a try. It's very cool. And there's a lot you can nerd out with it. But if you're interested in this for purely practical reasons and you don't need to talk over like very yeah, sunspots. I'm going to talk about more about that later. Well, maybe I won't. I see it's already 9:41. Um Sunspots, yes, believe it or not, the sun actually is very important to radio use, especially high frequency radio use. And let me explain that super quick. Elliot, you mentioned before about line of sight. Um, that is the case for VHF and UHF transmissions.
mhm.
It's line of sight. And for your typical transceiver, you're going to get maybe 5 miles. You can increase that by going up. So I want to say it's like every 10 meters you go, you get another mile or something like that. It's not huge.
Close to or something like that.
Yeah, but it makes a difference. Now there's another option which is using HF, high frequency. And the reason why is because high frequency radio waves are the right wavelength to be able to bounce off of the ionosphere. So let's say I'm here and you're here, and my head is a mountain. I can actually, with a VHF UHF bonk bonk, no dice. Although, and this is super technical, that's always also not always the case because each wavefront blasts out its own wavefront. But if you want to understand that, I have a story on my IG page that explains it. But on HF, I can shoot a signal up here, bounce it off the ionosphere, and this person down here can hear it. This works best with lots of sunspot activity. So when the sun is quiet, doesn't work as well. You can't go as far. When the sun is loud, when we have lots of sunspot activity, it's possible to speak with people on other continents, which is pretty cool.
I've heard about all of that happening when they were transmitting. There was some event, they were at the top of the mountain, and he got to somebody that was literally on the other side of the earth, and it was only
Yeah.
possible because of the day and where they
hmm
were and all this stuff, and it was pretty cool.
We are, if I'm not mistaken, about to, or we have already entered a period of high sunspot activity. So this is like a really good time to be able to give that a shot and try it.
Nice. That
Yeah.
transition. That's
Mhm.
cool.
Yeah, definitely.
So the part of ham radio that you're getting the license for is actually transmitting. Anybody can receive radio waves. That's why they put one in your car. You can
That's
just
right.
listen to the
Anybody can
radio in
buy
the car.
these. And
But it's the transmission part. It's the getting your message out there that seems to be the hang up with the government. They want to know who you are, where you are, all this bullshit.
yeah, that's
Yeah,
the scary part.
and
So
and you pay them for the permission to use
the privilege.
science, whatever the hell
Mhm.
it is. Yeah.
It's true. It's true. Yes, this is the forbidden button on my transceiver. It says PTT. That stands for push to talk. So that starts sending my voice attached to a carrier signal out everywhere around me. Which is important to keep in mind because you do not have control over who in range can hear that. Everybody can. It's omnidirectional, right? For that reason, you actually kind of want to be careful about transmitting. You want to practice what's called good electromagnetic hygiene because if you are transmitting with the right tools, I can find your location. Um, so we're seeing some of the consequences of poor operational security, poor OPSEC, right, in Ukraine right now. Watching people not respect those rules and then they pay the price for it.
Sure.
So a big thing right now with like military doctrine is having better electromagnetic hygiene. We put out so many signals all day. Your cell phone is constantly blasting signals. So for that reason, it's good to keep in mind who can potentially hear what you're saying, and I mentioned before there are ways to mitigate that. One of them is to pick a frequency that you think is not being listened to. Of course, if somebody has a scanner, that's not going to help you because that scanner will find the frequency you're talking on. So, just things to keep in mind.
Right.
Um,
And what you were saying about electromagnetic hygiene, you're talking about if you're transmitting on when you get on a channel or if you're using like analog equipment, not like the Baofeng we have with the digital buttons, you have to make sure that signal is as tight as you can make it, right? Because I mean, that's not going to stop other people from picking up what you're transmitting, but it's not going to interfere with other wavelengths close to it, right? Or
yeah, yeah, that's right. Yeah. They try to maintain like a pretty big buffer between these frequencies so problems don't start happening. I don't know if you've paid any attention to like the 5G rollout,
yeah,
but one of the issues with the 5G rollout was that airplane transponders use a frequency that is relatively close. It's actually not that close to 5G, but shit happens sometimes, and sometimes a transmission can bleed over outside of the band you intended to, and so they were concerned that that may cause problems. Um, yeah. So yeah, if you want to have secure comms, it shouldn't be unencrypted over public air. Absolutely, obviously. However, doing that is illegal, so you shouldn't do that. Um, what I would say also, is that if someone doesn't have a scanner, what you want to do is listen to frequencies, see who's using them. um that's also one way you can help protect yourself, because if the frequency is in use, people are listening to it. Somebody asked how much science you actually need to know to pass the test. You will have to learn a little bit of electrical engineering. You are going to have to learn what a schematic is, and you will have to learn what some of the basic icons on the schematic mean. What's a transformer? What's an oscillator? What's an inducer? Stuff like that. It is a multiple choice question test, though, or a multiple choice answer. So I would come up with like the dumbest, like, mnemonics and like ideas to remember the answers to some of the questions. And you can see me in action doing that in the ham prep I have on the Discord server. It's and I learned that from another old timer who helped me study for the other tests. He's like, there's a billion numbers. You're not going to remember all of them, so you need to do what you can to, like, find something about the question that triggers that memory for you, where you remember that, say the national calling frequency. Um, I'm not going to tell you I know that off the top of my head. See, I was going to say the wrong thing. It's 146.52 megahertz. Um, don't try to memorize all that. Instead, look at the question and see what about the answers has something in it that will like spark that memory for you.
Right.
How often do you use that info when you're using the radio? Not that often. Not that often. A lot of this technical stuff is not important to everyday use. However, that said, um, there are definitely exceptions and situations where having a theoretical understanding of things can be very helpful. Like, for example, let's say, you're trying to tune into a frequency. I'm trying to listen to, the National Weather Service, and I'm, not getting a good reception. What do I do? What do you do? Well, basic thing you can do is move. But why would that help? Well, it could help because it's possible that the signal you're getting isn't clear enough, because it's actually bouncing off of multiple things, and you're actually receiving that signal from a bunch of different directions. Modern radios can handle that to an extent, um, but can still be a problem. So understanding that, understanding the physics behind that, all these different frequencies coming, all these different signals coming in can cause interference, can, help you troubleshoot stuff. But no, if you just want to like talk to somebody, you do not have to remember what, the LED indicator on a schematic is. You don't. I'm sorry. The diode thing. That's not going to help you there, obviously, but it's on the test. You may get it as a question.
Cool. All right. So I feel like I have a decent handle on like what it is. And you've mentioned like using these different bandwidths. So what are
Hmm.
the benefits to different bandwidths in
Sure.
terms of like what you can use them for?
Sure.
Or
So the government breaks out, and I will post a copy of this on the Discord server later. This is what's called the band plan, and you may be asking, why is it called a band? What does that mean? Um, for some reason, somebody decided at some point that we should all remember frequencies not based on their frequency, but their bandwidth. I'm sorry, their wavelength. So that's what a band is. A band is referring to wavelength. It's measured in metric measurement units, and the ones that we're going to be interested in are going to be like in the centimeter or meter measurements. So, for example, two major bands that we use as amateurs are 70 centimeters and 2
2
meters.
meters. Yep.
Yep, yep.
I remember.
Elliot's got that one.
Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, the frequencies for any. I think I can break this down. Tell me if I'm wrong. I'm sure
Sure.
you will. The frequencies is closer to the power output you're using to create the wavelength, and the bandwidth is the wave itself.
It's a physical measurement of the wave. It literally is how long the wave is across.
Yep.
And that can matter. For example, let's say that there are bad conditions. It's raining. Rain can stop some wavelengths. Doesn't stop other wavelengths.
It'll knock them right down.
Yep. So that's something that you want to consider. Conditions can change that. And literally in that case, it's because the wavelengths are so small that the water droplets are absorbing them. So you'd have to then switch to a bigger wavelength, which means a smaller frequency, right? So one important basic thing is that those go in different directions. The higher the frequency, the lower the bandwidth. And that's a question on the test too.
So you're studying as we're going.
Yeah. I try to keep myself refreshed with all that stuff. Do we want to talk about my gadgets real quick?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Tell me
All right.
gadgets.
Yes. So
I mean,
I've
you
already
started with Radio Shack. I'm curious.
Okay. Oh yeah. Well, this one. This guy I think is at this point 23 years old. Still works great. And I've been able to listen to broadcasts all around the world using it. It is just a receiver. It's not a transceiver. Those are way more expensive. There's not much, no real way to get around that.
Yeah.
So here I have my hand transceiver. So I talked about the rubber duck a little bit. This is a slight upgrade from that. This is called a whip. This is a small whip. And I'm about to screw this into what's called an SMA port, I guess you could say. I got a tip from somebody that these connections that you use to screw the antenna on have a limited lifespan. You can only screw and unscrew these so many times before it stops working. That's like in the high thousands, I'm sure. So what he suggested was you get a connector, an SMA connector, to put into the radio, so that instead of having to unscrew this every time I want to switch antennas, I now am putting that wear on this SMA connector. So it helps extend the life of your hand transceiver. For the Baofeng, that probably doesn't matter. But if you decide to invest in a good radio that is a couple $100, you want that to last as long as possible. So get another connector. Note that anytime you make the distance between your antenna and the radio longer, that impacts the signal negatively. However, this tiny space on my Baofeng isn't going to make a big difference. I will probably not notice. So, what can I use this for if I don't want to hold it up to my face? Okay, so one thing is that you can plug it in. I've got my little my crummy little speaker here, and it's got a microphone pad there, and you plug it in to the side of your radio like that. Whoop, make sure you get the right ones in, and then I have my little security style earpiece, and then I can clip that to my lapel there. Okay, another option would be this guy. These are called PTTs, push to talks, and the idea is that you plug this one in, okay, and then you attach your push to talk somewhere relatively easily accessible, and then if I want to talk, just hit the button, okay? If I want to go a step further, okay, my push to talk has a little port here. Okay, see, I don't know if you can see it really well.
Yep.
There you go. So I'm going to plug my aux into that. And then I can plug that into my headset. And that way I can listen to the radio with my earmuffs on, and I can also talk by using the push to talk, which is also a microphone. So got my my what are they? Howard Lee's, something like that. Impact Sports.
Leighton,
Leighton, thank you.
you got it.
It's a good budget option. I was able to get
$40
these
well
off.
spent, $35.
Yep, eBay.
Yep.
eBay. And then I did a few upgrades to it. If you go to my IG page, you can see me stuffing foam inside, but I also have these gel
I
cups.
was gonna say, gotta get the gel cups, but
Gotta get the gel cups. Oh, it's
changes the game.
a big quality of life boost. You don't have to pay a ton for them. You can get cheapo ones off of eBay too. And I don't know if you can see this, but they have a slide cut here, which if you have glasses is pretty freaking nice.
Yeah.
Because if you don't have this, your glasses mean that they don't do like a good enough seal.
Either the earmuffs are on and your glasses aren't, or your glasses are and your earmuffs aren't good. And
yeah, no bueno. So definitely don't scoff at the gel cups. I'm a big supporter of the gel cups. If you want to get fancier, you can also eventually move to a more expensive headset that has integration for a microphone. And so, then you don't need the PTT, but at the end of the day, you're still going to be hitting a button to transmit, and you want it to be that way. You want to have, full control over that. All right. My next little gadget here. So let me unplug the PTT real quick. Okay. This is a USB cable. Hand transceivers are very, especially Baofangs, are very hard to program or have it save different frequencies you want to use repeatedly manually. They're much easier to program.
I stopped short of downloading Chirp.
Chirp.
I stopped short of it. That's where I left off. So when I get back,
get Chirp. What's great about Chirp is that it has a preloaded list of frequencies that you can add.
So basically what Chirp is, for people who are following along, it is what he was talking about. It's difficult to manually program some of these radios to transmit on the frequencies that you want. So instead of pushing the buttons and reading instructions in Chinese and all this, there's a free software that somebody's downloaded with its pre-programmed with the frequencies. Mm-hmm. You just download it. Make sure you get the right plug for your radio. You'll plug it in and it downloads everything that you need to go, and you do that once and you're good to go. I think there's updates every once in a while, but that's about it.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And if you have a frequency that you want to use with your group, you can also very easily enter it on Chirp and have that update to the transceiver. Chirp is really nice.
Sure. So we have a question here where it says, what would you consider essential from a preparedness perspective for the radio? And I think just having a radio that you know is going to work, whether it's you can recharge it or if it's a crank radio.
Crank radio.
Yeah. Yes. Getting information when you're either on the move or if you're hunkering down, it helps you. If we talked about our preparedness, find out your time frame. If you need to get moving, having a radio will tell you when you should probably get out of there or how long you have. Or if they're saying stay put, help's on the way, you'll know that again with the radio. Yep. So I think, everybody has the ability to, like you said, receive. This is more for being able to transmit and reach out to people. But it seems like it's kind of open, and it seems like it's we brought it up, operational security. If you're not sure what's going on, then transmitting is probably the last thing you want to do. So listening seems to be a bit more important in this case, I think, for preparedness.
That's right. You bring up a really good point. I want to mention though. Everything I said about following the rules and following the guidelines, all of that goes out the window in an emergency.
Right.
In a true emergency, I don't care if you have a license or not. Get on the radio and transmit.
Sure.
You won't you won't suffer any repercussions. I definitely recommend getting a backup battery for your hand transceiver. And I would say, yeah, think about getting this as a preparedness item. You can take it wherever. It really does not have a huge energy use, and that's one thing that's to me, not to get super doomer, but
Oh, I'll get super doomer.
yeah, I know, I'm like, yeah, I
You're in
should
the right
I should-
place.
I'm
Listen,
in the right place. Yeah.
yeah,
Radio, especially receiving, has very low energy use, very low. In fact, um, doing it digitally through basically packet radio, creating packets of information and converting that to text, uses even less energy than talking over the radio. So for that reason, and the fact that um, it's not that complex a technology, tells me that it's not going away. It's gonna always be useful. Um, you really don't need infrastructure for it. You just need somebody with enough power to transmit. Ideally with like a radio tower, right? And somebody with a very simple receiver, which has very low power use needs, and
you can
or,
get it
or
working with a hand crank.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I like the hand crank solar panel combo radios.
it does a
But
little bit of everything. And
yep.
I think from a preparedness standpoint, since you brought up the doomer part of it, think about how valuable you'll be if you're the only guy that knows how to use a radio,
Yeah,
or person, or whoever it is.
yeah,
Because
and
I'll tell you, there's amateurs out there and people know how to do it, but if you look at how many are out there and how big some of the clubs are, you're going to be pretty valuable if you know how to get information and
oh
how to
yeah.
do all of this, especially when people are panicking because they didn't learn
Mhm.
any of this shit before they needed it. So
Yeah, this may not surprise anybody, but most amateurs are of retirement age. Um, this is literally like I'm increasingly seeing this as like a traditional skill that is going to be diminished if we don't like pick it up from older generations. And let me tell you, these guys, they're super, and it's almost all guys. In fact, there's a specific bit of radio lingo that bothers me as a non-binary person, which is that you're supposed to sign off with OM, which stands for old man. Which I guess even the women who do it say that too. So whatever. Um, but yeah, they are super enthusiastic about their hobby. They are happy to, teach you. They tend to have cash because it's an expensive hobby. And there's all kinds of stories about the radio club coming together to help somebody put up a radio tower or stuff, or like contribute. Definitely take advantage of those folks. Are they going to be like super woke leftists? They will not. But you know,
You know what you're getting yourself into.
exactly, yeah, and
knowledge is for everyone. So take that shit.
that's right. And
Do
you want to know
with it
what?
what you will.
Yeah, like the airwaves aren't for that. They're not for they're not for politics.
Right.
Maybe they will be someday, but right now they're not.
Well,
So
politics is sharing information, and I feel like the airwaves are for. Sorry, the politics is sharing opinions, and I
mhm,
feel like the airwaves are for sharing information. I think that's the
yep,
main differentiator. It's kind of why you have to keep the language clean, be
yes,
respectful, because,
mhm,
um, and that's also why emergencies take priority over all else because that's valuable information, and
absolutely.
it's got to get out there and it's got to be heard.
I can't wait for like in 35 years when CB radio is just for like shit posting.
Have you seen that meme where it's
That'd be kind of
like
fun.
the guy in the desert and he's like making a meme on the back of a camel?
Yes, that's gonna be
Um,
me.
yeah, no, like unfortunately, packet radio can also send images. So yes, we can be sending memes to each other over the radio waves.
Sure, and
Someday.
there's new school tech and GPS little gadgets that can do the packet stuff too, so you can sort of get information on there. You can send text
Yeah.
from, so those are all, it's all cool stuff, and that's very
Yeah, we
high tech.
barely scratched the surface.
There's some very
There's
high tech stuff, and there's some very low tech stuff, and
um
there's
one cool thing you can do with a ham radio license is talk to the International Space Station. And satellites are actually like a pretty big part of amateur, an increasingly bigger part of amateur radio, which includes wacky stuff like being able to do like real time tactical positioning using satellites and radio software.
are we going to get into ATAC?
We are not. Can I level with you? The reason I have not gotten into ATAC is because I don't have an Android.
Yeah, yeah.
That's really the only reason. ATAC is here. You know what? I'm not gonna just. I'll.
Is that open source, or is somebody doing that?
I don't. That's a good question.
I found it on my Android phone. It's
So ATAC stands for the Android. Wait, what? Android Team Awareness Kit,
so
or
Android
Android
is
Tactical Assault Kit. So what this is it says it's a suite of software that provides geospatial information and allows user collaboration over geography.
so it is based on the users. It's not open source, but it's
Yeah.
done by the users for the users, sort of thing.
If you're a LARPer and you like radio stuff, this is like the expert level is getting ATAC and all that nonsense set up. It's very cool. I'd like to get into it someday. I'm not there yet.
So
I
I know.
only LARP on weekends, so I have it installed on my phone. No big deal.
So we had talked earlier about like what's going on with Russia and Ukraine, and like
Yeah.
circling back to like why is all of this important and how we're seeing that play out in real time right now.
Sure. So let me just. There's a what's the word for the Russian encrypted comm system? It is called ERA. ERA. Okay. So you might think that the Russian military has a state-of-the-art, advanced, sophisticated, encrypted communication system, and they do. They do. The problem, though, is that it uses 3G and 4G to work. And if you have blown up the 3G and 4G infrastructure, you cannot use it, which has literally forced the Russian military to use unencrypted comms. You see pictures of them with Baofangs, with Motorola's, and it's just a radio. They're just
So-
talking
so
and talking
now
for the
they're
whole world to hear.
Now they're LARPing.
Oh yeah, a little. Yeah. You know, if you do not have good communications, you cannot coordinate things. And I think
Or you
we're
can,
pretty-
and everybody's going to know about it. Which that's
Well, yeah, that's true too. You know, like how many recordings are now up on the internet of Russian military speaking to each other? A lot. And that's the thing. Anything you say out on the waves can be recorded by somebody. So, you know, be careful. Be careful what you say.
Yeah, especially if you have a podcast. Everything's recorded.
That's right. Yeah, the internet remembers. The internet remembers. So if you
Larry's is coming for us, Andy. I'm just saying.
Finally.
So if you find yourself in a combat zone, yeah, don't use unencrypted comms. But you know, also keep in mind that that's not something that you as a civilian can realistically practice. But what you can practice is finding out that if I want to scan, I hit the pound button. Okay. Scanning begins. Yeah.
And that finds open.
So what scanning will do is it finds a signal that exceeds your squelch. What is squelch? So if we just had our radio taking in all kinds of signals, we could potentially be hearing a lot of static, and scanning would just wouldn't really work because there's electromagnetic radiation all over the place, right? So what you do is you set a squelch, which says if the signal coming through is not this loud, I don't want to hear it. So you can either set that low, you can set the squelch high to try to make sure that you're not, getting in like a really far but very strong signal that is interfering with the frequencies that you want to use.
So it's like noise gate.
It's exactly what it is. Yep. And squelch is used as like a technical process for pretty much all radios to make sure that you're focusing on what you want to actually listen to.
Cool.
Yep.
So I know you'd wanted to go for about an hour. We've broken
Oh,
that.
hit me up with questions. I'm good.
If does anyone watching have any questions they want to drop, or Elliot?
Yeah. So if you do want to use this in a more secure way, and I know you said with the FCC and how there's like the self-policing going on, but then in the case of emergency or the shit hits the fan scenario, for lack of a better term
Right.
for it, it would you how would you
How would I start going about that?
yeah, like what do you do?
So what you would need to do is set up a digital software radio network so that you could implement software tools to do that, pretty basically.
Okay.
There's it's you are not going to get, all right, find the squelch button. You are not going to be able to get your hands on the hardware that would do it for you, pretty basically.
No fucking emitters, none of that stuff.
And I'm not an expert about military communications, but my understanding is that they are not something you can just pick up and use. They're pretty complicated.
They got some cool stuff, and if the amateur stuff brings in physics, and I have to, do a seance with Marconi himself to figure out how this shit works, like I don't know. They have some pretty interesting stuff, and it's all about how they mask signals and they break it up, chop it up into itty bitty pieces. It's how I thought the TV worked, basically.
Yep. And there's systems that will automatically switch frequencies, so you're never on the same frequency for too long.
Yeah.
It can get very complex, but realistically, the only way that you, as a civilian, are going to be able to get into that is if you really focus on the software side of things. And you'll find that there are a lot of different tools out there that can help you do some very interesting stuff.
So that's the reason that I wanted to get into all of this, and I realized that I was opening up a can of worms, and that's also why I guess like the radio guy in Army situations, that's his job is to handle the radio, and there's somebody else that does everything else, and it's because it's a very all-encompassing thing. He's the one that's got to climb the mountain and get up there and use it, bounce it off a sunspot or whatever, get help. It's all dramatized in movies and stuff, but that's pretty much what we've been talking about for the past hour. So
yeah,
I think it's important to learn. Anybody who was coming in here trying to figure out how to get on a radio and start talking, it's not very easy. I mean, I guess it can be if you're doing like the FRS handheld walkie-talkies from
CB radio. I just hit the button and start talking. It's not
it's not that hard, but understanding how it works, and I guess all of the radios that we've talked about have been digital, and I think the amateur radios and the CB radios, those are the more analog kind of big contraptions sitting on desks.
That's right. And those are more expensive, more complicated.
Right. So they're a bit different, but it's a huge tool for communication, but I don't think it's like Facebook where everybody's putting out their opinions. The radio's for listening first. And that was the first thing that I learned is you have to listen first before you can talk. And I'm pretty sure that's why I set it aside, because to be honest, I like to hear my own voice.
And like it's intimidating. It's intimidating it's
a lot.
Get on the air because you're supposed to get on the air and you're supposed to say your call sign, and there's like like a very specific kind of song and dance about it. But everybody on the airwaves is happy to like teach you what to do and say and stuff. I saw somebody asked about a Facebook group. Yes, I don't know if it still exists. I haven't used Facebook too much recently, but try searching for a group called "I Study the Antenna." You'll find a leftist radio enthusiast group, which is they're very knowledgeable, more than me.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
Yeah,
I
and for
found that
folks,
channel too. It's pretty good.
yeah, and for folks that are looking for another active place, our Discord, we've mentioned it a couple times, but we do have a radio. I don't know what things are called on Discord, but a spot on Discord that's focused more on radio skills. So
channels, Andy. They're channels.
channels. Okay, it's like the analog TV. You turn the channels. Yeah. Okay.
Well,
I'm
it's
on
like
it.
you have a server, and then the server has channels. It took me a while to learn this stuff, but I got it eventually.
I showed him how to set it up, and he just went after it.
I
thought
knew this
I thought he was learning.
No, I just like if you guys ever watch the Mitchells versus the Machines, it's like this little kids movie. Like the dad has to like log into YouTube and it's just like him screaming at the computer and like he's like, I accidentally ordered 12 towels on Amazon. Like that's me with technology. Don't let me near it.
You were kind enough to set up a ham dash radio channel. If you go there, you will find I have included the very start of some ham radio study, but you could also just come on there and ask me questions too. I'm happy to help out.
Yeah, and there's a bunch of folks. I think you're probably the most knowledgeable one, but there's definitely a bunch of folks involved over there in that section. So
yeah, I think
there's
there might be some
support.
people who have more experience than I do for sure. But I studied the antenna, like I studied the blade,
Yeah, past tense.
while you were doing.
It might be private now. I remember when Facebook went through that like public issue, public private.
Yeah.
So that it might be hard to find. I know at least a couple of the groups that I'm in kind of went that way, and it seems like they've all kind of died, which is unfortunate.
It is unfortunate. Not a huge surprise though.
Yeah,
Sadly.
Facebook. It's what they wanted.
Yeah, but please, it's a cool hobby. It's a practical pursuit, and if other people start doing it, then I have more people to talk to.
So I got a question for you. So we've talked about like, all right, if you buy a ham radio, like how far does it actually go? It goes like 50 miles.
You're gonna get about 5 miles out of this.
5 miles. All right. So
If
I think really that
go up high, you can get a little more, but not a lot more.
So what this really underscores is that like functionally for this to work, you have to have a community that you can relay this information to, and that's something we talk a lot about in general on the show and the podcast and so on. And while it's important to have these skills, if you have no one to share them with, then it's not going to help you other than yourself in an emergency. And like there's nothing wrong with that necessarily, but bigger picture, this is just one piece of a puzzle of building that community.
Yeah, I figured you'd have to answer questions to join the Facebook group. All of the lefty like LARPer groups are like that. Unfortunate but necessary.
Yep, you get to go through hoops.
Yeah, so we talked about repeaters a little bit earlier. So that's another way that you can extend your reach. And typically repeaters will be set up at a higher elevation so that they can broadcast out further. But the more nodes in this network, the wider the reach. It is of limited use if you don't have people to talk to.
Oh, that was one of my questions. So if you can't encrypt when you're transmitting, can you encrypt your own repeater? Like if you set up a repeater, it has to be for everybody to use. You can't just set up your own personal repeater.
I mean, you could do so unlawfully,
right?
It would be kind of similar to running like a pirate radio.
Yeah.
But you can go through the official channels and set up your own repeater. There may actually be one already in your town, and that can potentially get you access to other repeaters, and then other radios, and it just kind of branches out from there.
Sky's the limit.
The sky's the limit. Someday we may be turning this all into one big mesh net and talking to each other that way. I don't know, but
It'll be this interconnection of networks.
yeah,
Maybe we could call it the internet.
maybe. That reminds me. If you want to read, if you were like me and you prefer reading things rather than watching videos, no offense, guys. Um, check out the anarchist. Oh, yes, the PDF is called "For an Anarchist Radio Relay League," and you will find a kindly anonymous anarchist to explain a bunch of stuff to you, including like why this matters and what about the government and et cetera, et cetera. And if you were like me and did not read that first, you would not have read him giving you the sage advice of using a PO box so that your address is not on the FCC website. But oh well.
Here we are.
Here we are. So yeah, check that out. I think I may have posted that on the Discord previously. If not, maybe we can like pin it or something.
Sure. I'll have to make Elliot do that because I can't do that.
Yes. There. Yep. You found it. There you go. Yep. That's a great place to start. You can also find other radio people. He lists them by call sign, and I was able to just like find their YouTube channels and stuff. So
awesome. Well, Seneca, thanks so much. This has been fantastic. I learned
Absolutely.
a bunch. Hopefully,
You just scratched the surface.
Yeah. Oh, it's so true. But you know what? Like in 30 minutes, I'm going to be kicking myself because I forgot to say something important. But
you know what? At the point is, I think for me at least, it's like I understand the language of what radio is enough that if I go looking further, I can like follow a train of thought. Which I think for a lot of people getting into a new hobby, it's really hard to kind of figure out. Like I don't know the jargon to understand what anyone's talking about.
so much
So
jargon.
even if someone explains it to me, I'm just like deer in headlights.
Sure. And I started because I have ADD. I bought the radio first, and then I got the radio and looked at the box and was like, well, what do I do now? And then I found myself on YouTube and all this stuff. And for me, I found the science part fascinating. And I didn't learn anything about the radio, but I learned about how radio waves work and what a radio does and all this shit. Still don't know how to use it, but I kind of know how it works now. So that's kind of where I left. That's kind of where I left off. And there's so many avenues and so many different areas that you might find fascinating. And there's other stuff where you're like, I don't ever want to have to deal with that again. But there's a lot of information there, and it's once you find one thing, it just keeps going. It's crazy. I love it though.
Yep. Yeah, me too. And like you said, we just barely scratched the surface. You can really kind of go on like an endless rabbit hole about this stuff, or you can learn just enough to be able to have your radio ready to go, and you have your channels programmed. You know what the buttons do. You hit your button, you start talking. The point of getting into this is so that you can practice. The same as getting into like firearms or medical stuff. You need to be able to do it so that you can do it in a not so great situation.
Right. Yeah. And also think the time you were born, I guess, because we have the internet now, and it's an endless resource of information for learning the radio. I couldn't imagine learning how to do this if you just had a radio and you could only talk to other people with radios. Like,
and you got a book.
It'd be pretty hard. Yeah, an outdated book or maybe a new book that doesn't cover everything.
They don't make you do this anymore, but you also used to have to memorize Morse code back then too.
For
the test.
That makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
I think that's as encrypted as you're gonna get over the airwaves too. So
yeah, I definitely follow all federal regulations and guidelines. Do not use encrypted transmissions or code. But that said, you can
doesn't hurt to know one.
I'm sure everybody's seen TVs and movies where everybody has code names and shit. So think along those lines if you wanted to, which I'm not recommending you do.
I was just pissed off when I learned I couldn't actually get my LARP on and get one of those throat mics with the push to talk and the bone induction fucking headsets and all this cool military radios and stuff. I found out that's impossible to get, and I was like, all right, I'm done. I'm just
Yeah,
gonna go sit out in the woods with my
I know. Where's
my,
the
my, my nice gel cups and my camo sweatshirt, and I guess that'll be it.
where's the transhumanist future I was promised? Where's my subdermal radios? No, that's okay. I don't want any of that actually.
Yeah.
Happy with it on the outside. Um, I was gonna say one other thing real briefly.
Sure.
On the topic of radio jammers. Um, those are also super legal. Um,
Legal or illegal?
illegal.
Illegal.
It looks like the internet will sell you some. Don't fall for it. They are very illegal. Don't do that. Definitely don't look into the basic technology that is used to make a jammer. That's also very bad. Don't do that.
Cool.
Yeah.
Good final thoughts.
Yeah, that's right.
Seneca, thanks so much. I'm
Thank
gonna
you,
kick you
Andy.
off
Thank you, Elliot.
and
Great meeting you both.
do a little pitch about Poor Proles Almanac.
Cool.
Yeah.
Folks that are like, what the hell am I watching?
Thanks for the
So, yeah,
time. Thanks
thanks so
coming
much.
on.
Thank you. Have a good one.
We'll see you in Discord, man.
Yep. Cheers.
See ya. All right. So hopefully you guys enjoyed that. I sure did. I don't know how much will stick in my brain, but it's going to be there for a little while.
It was a very
For
general conversation. There's a lot to
Yeah.
learn there.
So for folks that are tuning in and wondering what you just watched, this is the Poor Proles Almanac. We have a Twitch channel here. We are also a podcast, which is probably where most people know us from, or our memes. I'm not sure.
Probably
But
Instagram memes.
Yeah, we're kind of a big deal on Instagram and I guess Facebook too. So we have a podcast. We have an episode coming out next Sunday called Gastrocolonialism and Diet Resistance with Dr. Sophie Chow. So if you're interested in talking about indigenous resistance, we have a really good interview from some folks on the other side of the world. Right. Recently, we released an episode on Dayak forest farming. Really cool subject. Lots of interesting history, and we pair it with some of the stuff going on right now in that part of the world in Indonesia. So go check that out if you're interested in hearing us talk some more. We are going to be on Twitch or Facebook or YouTube, wherever you're watching this right now. In 1 week, we'll be doing leather tanning 101. So the whole concept of this channel is really around this idea of discussing skill shares with folks that know more than we do, so we can learn more things just like you. So we're going to be learning about the basics of leather tanning. I believe she's going to be bringing a squirrel to tan. So if you want to see how to tan a squirrel, because you got that annoying one that keeps getting your bird feeder, like go out with your pellet gun or 22 or whatever and make a leather or make some leather with us. Yeah, make like a sock out of a squirrel sock. So if you enjoyed this, you want to support this project of creating content, you can support us by subscribing on Twitch. If you're watching on there, please feel free to throw us a couple bucks. You can also support us by jumping on our Patreon. For $2, you get a week early access to every episode. Plus, we have a 22-part series that's up there that's Patreon exclusive. So for $2, I think it's like 6.8 cents a day, you can support the work we're doing. We appreciate it. It makes us know that what we're doing isn't just blathering into the internet and like putting all this time and effort and research and money.
No, it is just that, but
I mean, it's kind of that, but
you're
also
you're having fun. We're having fun.
If you wanted to show your appreciation, we would definitely appreciate it. You can also throw us a couple bucks on Venmo or a Cash App. Where Venmo, we're at Poor Proles Almanac. Cash App, it's the money symbol Poor Proles. And that's pretty much it, I think. Elliot, anything else?
Nope, you plugged our next episode.
Next Twitch. Yeah, I think that's everything. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this. It's lots of fun for us.
Yep, and we post, you post all our updates on the Instagram story. So if you follow us on Instagram, that's pretty much where you'll get all the updates from us.
Yeah, and also, follow us on Instagram or Facebook or we're on Twitter too. This might actually be being watched on Twitter. I don't get the data for how many people are watching on Twitter, but like I know people do. because they'll like comment on there and it doesn't. I don't know why it doesn't sync. It's supposed to, but it doesn't. So if you're watching over there and commenting and no one's responding to you, I'm sorry.
Yell at your stream, dude. Let's fix this shit.
Yeah. No, we're not going to do that, Mr. Mitzi. And hopefully, if you guys didn't watch this or didn't see the whole thing and you want to, you can hop on our YouTube. It usually gets uploaded about 3 hours after we stream. So you can watch the first half of this if you missed some of it. So I think that's all I got, Elliot. You got anything else? We good? Ready to
That's
wrap
it.
this up? All right.
Yeah. Be good to yourselves and good to each other. Let's get the fuck out of here.
Yeah. Get a ham radio. Bye.